Hello, you are very welcome to my day off. Today we will examine this knife, the Victorinox Farmer with A-lock scales. In my last Swiss Army knife video I used this knife, the Ranger Grip 78. This is a beast of a folder, and a fairly large saw gives it the same utility as a large chopping knife, in my opinion. But it may be too large for some people and may not be legal to carry in some countries because of its length and the locking blade. So this brings us to the Farmer. To be honest, I have wanted one of these since I saw my German friend Tom in the Woods use one in his videos. And what caught my eye is this reamer / punch, as they describe it, mounted in the same position as a normal blade. This appeals to me much more than the reamer, punch and sewing eye mounted on the back of many Swiss Army knives. I think this would be much more useful. When I saw this, I knew straight away that I would find uses for it. What the uses are I don't know, but I'll find out. The Ranger Grip was my first introduction to the Victorinox saws, and I think it's an excellent saw for the size and very, very useful. Now I have an almost 3-inch saw in a very conveniently sized folder. I'm not going to go into all of the specs, you can look them up online, but for those of you who would like to know for legal reasons, the blade is exactly 2 3/4 inches long. It's also a bit thicker than other Swiss Army knives of a similar size. The scales, of course, as I mentioned earlier, are aluminium or A-locks. That's all very well, but you may ask, is this knife any good in the outdoors? Well, I'm glad you asked, because today we're going to use this to build a survival shelter. So enough with the jibber jabber, let's get to work. This is where we're going to build a shelter, guys, and where we are is in the corner of an orchard. And I've picked this spot because I want to leave this shelter for some months to evaluate how the materials that I use will work or last. So I'm going to move around. Hopefully I'll get a share of poles here, and if not, I'll move out to the surrounding hedgerows in the countryside. Our first job is to get some poles, so let's get to it. I couldn't find much in the line of straight poles in the orchard, so I've come to the woods. What I intend to do is do 50-50, half the poles with the saw and half with the knife blade. So we're going to start here with the saw. This is obviously much smaller than the Ranger Grip. But the Swiss Army saws are nice and rigid. I like that. They're not flimsy or pliable, bendy. That's a sharp little saw. Can't be too far from the end. There's very little holding that. It could do with being a little bit bigger, but as we see, it'll get through the wood. Give me a moment and I'll pull this out of here. Here's our pole. It's a bit over 12 feet long, so I'm going to cut it in half, and that'll give us 2 shelter poles. So I need 6 for 2 tripods and 1 crossbar, and then a few light poles for putting my shelter material on. Here we have another long sapling that will give us at least 2 poles. We'll use the knife this time. No bother to Victorinox. So I got that pole down, and from it I got 2 sturdy shelter poles. So we can get another good pole here. This one is partially broken from where it was joined to the other pole, but it's still very thick down there and would be quite hard to cut. So I'm just going to cut it here with the saw. I was hoping to get a bend on this one. There we go. I think I'll use this for my crossbar. So we just measure that. And we'll break this off using the saw this time. He doesn't want to go too easily. It's pretty warm here today, let me tell you that. I don't have much room for the camera here, but this is our last tripod pole, or heavy pole. So I'll cut this with a knife. There we go. And we need to reduce it to length. It's hot. It's pretty hot here today. We'll cut a few light poles now and that'll be our frame sorted. Now I'm going to make a frame for my shelter using 2 tripods and a crossbar. You know, there are many experts on YouTube and the internet who will tell you that you can't cut shelter poles with a simple slip joint knife. It can't be done. Isn't the internet great? I've got my shelter frame put together. I added a bipod here to spread out some of the weight. I have my crossbars on. Normally I just tap these legs into the ground, but the ground is a bit hard at the moment. So at each corner I've tied it down, pegged it down to the ground just for safety. And that has made it pretty damn rigid. The twine I've used is baling twine, just common baling twine, but it's very cheap, it's strong, and I've got miles of it, so why not? Now we need something to cover it with, so let's head off and find that. I'm going to use two different materials to attach my shelter. On one side I'm going to put these field rushes, and on the other side I'm going to use rosebay willow herb. Now cutting this is quite hard on edge, and while the Swiss Army knives are decent knives, it's not exactly Valerian steel, and this one is already dulling a little, so I need to give it a quick touch up. So for this I'm going to use my sandpaper sharpening kit. It's just a piece of light wood and various grits of sandpaper glued to a piece of cardboard, so I can interchange them. So I'm going to start here with 800 grit. And I just use it as a strop. So now we have 1000 grit. And 1200 grit. To finish off, I'm going to use the little pocket strap that Iron Horse 19 made for me. Thanks again, Iron Horse. This is just a mini strap and I have green compound on it. So we'll strap the finish. Let's see. Shaving again. I've quite a bit of work to do collecting these with my knife, so I better get at it. Get rid of all the rubbish. Just like that, guys. And as I say, for the other side I'll use this rosebay willow herb. Generally you can break these off. Let's see. So they're easier to collect. And because they're so long, they'll cover quite a good area. So we'll gather bundles of these as well. So this is our thatching material gathered. This is the rushes and this is the rosebay willow herb. Gathering all of this is quite a tedious job, let me tell you. I'm going to begin thatching with the willow herb. I've used this once before, and what I did was leave the stalk or fat end facing upwards, because it just seems from looking at it that would be the best way for water to run off. So you always start your thatching or any roof at the bottom and work upwards. The last time I used these, I used brambles to tie them on, and I was able to sew them together using the brambles. That was very convenient. So what I need now is kind of a large needle to sew these together. So let's see if we can make one. Here we have a piece of sycamore. So I'll just peel that for a moment. Let's see if we can drill a few nice holes using the awl. I've actually played around with this for a bit, and you need to take your time and not rush it, otherwise you'll split the wood. That's one side. Go to the back now. So it makes a pleasantly round hole. Now I'm going to make a second hole and join the two to make the eye of our needle. Let's see if we can join the two. So there we go, the eye of the needle. One giant needle. When you finish one row, now you need to overlap this with the next row. That way, okay? So we need to tie these on. And we'll work our way across, okay? Okay guys, that's one side finished anyway. I hope to God I have enough material in this. I really could have done with 3 rows. I wanted to bring it up higher. I have a little left over, so I might add that in, but hopefully we have enough. If it's a failure, I'll let you know. I don't believe in making nonsense shelters and showing them on YouTube. Let's get on to the rushes. I'm not a thatcher, I'm no expert in thatching. I'm just progressing by trial and error. The way I put these rushes on is to put the wide end or thicker end down, tie them on and overlap as I go. So I'll start this row and get back to you. As I say, I'm progressing by trial and error, and I've used a few different knots for tying on the rushes. What I'm using at the moment is to take a loop around the crossbar, come around my rushes, tuck it in tightly, tuck it in so I have as little or as few gaps as possible. Then I'll add my next one, take a grip, and so on and so forth. In my last shelter I made the bundles very thick to see how that would go, and what happened was they were very wide at the bottom and narrow here, and it made for gaps all along. I've left them much narrower this time and they seem to be fitting together much better. So I'll work away in this row. With the second row of rushes, and the same with the willow herb, I like to overlap these knots and any little gap that may be there where the knots are. So I want something like that. So I'll just continue on as before with my second row. Okay, Dyson has been looking at something up in the tree. He's been trying to tell me there's something up there. Let's go and have a look. What is it, Dice? Who's there? What is it? Good boy. Right, he's been looking up here in the branches. Let's see if we can zoom in for you. That's a young pigeon or a squab, wood pigeon, a young wood pigeon. He's fairly well developed, but he still doesn't have his feathers, his adult feathers. But he's a fairly sizable chick. You might not think it to look at Dyson, but he has a high prey drive. He's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde character. You can switch it on and off. Anyway, back to the shelter. In my last few shelters, I turned the rushes fat side up for the very last row. And that's what I'm going to try here. And I want to butt it in with these. I didn't really have enough of willow herb. I wanted to overlap it, to have it coming well up, and just mesh my rushes in with it and see how that will work out. But we'll press on with it and see what happens. So I'll get this last row of rushes on. Here's the finished shelter. I eventually got it finished. Let's take a closer look. That's what it's like inside. Let's have a look at the rushes. So this is the rushes side. Maybe not the most beautiful work ever, but it should shed water. The peak or joining of the roof is always a hassle. It's not quite as neat as I had in my mind, but let's see how it works. Let's show you the other side. Okay, this is the Rosebay willow herb side. I used this before in a lean-to and it worked very well. So we'll see how it works this time. So now all we can do is wait and see if it's waterproof. And he said, let there be rain, and behold, there was rain. Lots of it. A bit too much of it maybe. This is the proof of the pudding, guys. Let's see how the shelter is working. I'm under an umbrella, just let me put it down. Yeah! Okay, well, as usual, the rushes are working perfectly well. I'm getting wet, I'm still in the rain. Let me move on. But maybe you can see the drops falling. The Rosebay willow herb is not working this time. It's leaking away nicely there. So the Rosebay willow herb this time is a failure. And the thatch once again is working absolutely perfect. I don't know if you can see the drops or not on camera. But they're dropping away steadily. This wouldn't be good, whereas the thatch works perfectly well. That's a pity. I thought it would be better. But I'm not going to show you a load of old bull crap. This is what it's really like. So, once again, our shelter didn't work for us. The last time I used willow herb for a shelter, I used great willow herb. That's the rather long willow herb you saw me show you earlier in the video, but I couldn't find that in large amounts this time. So I used at least 3 different varieties, and obviously they don't work as shelter material. So, we live and learn. From time to time I get great comments in the comments section. Comments that sum up everything that I'm struggling to put together in a video. And one chap who I respect is Chris Osh. And Chris made a great comment about shelter materials. I'm going to read it so I don't fluff it up. This is part of his comment. If you look at the historic uses of materials, it's obvious what works. Rushes and reeds in Europe have a centuries-old tradition. And that's a great comment. Look at the materials that have been used historically to roof houses, and look at what's being used in YouTube. Historically, you had straw, you had rushes, you had reeds, you had wooden shingles, and you had sod. Maybe some different types of grasses. Nobody historically used spruce boughs, or loose leaves, or moss, or ferns to roof their houses with. And that has to tell us something, guys. I got another great comment about folding knives from GD, Gary from Scotland. And he said, my father's penknife has a blade under 2 inches, and in the 70 years he's owned it, he has used it for all countryside tasks, such as gutting, skinning game, cleaning fish and woodwork. That sums up everything that I've been struggling to say in my videos. Just one comment. If you want to watch a review on Swiss Army knives by a real enthusiast, check out Aaron in Bushcraft North of 60. He's up there in the wilds of Canada living the dream. I'm going to put in some footage from him now and have a look at the funky way he makes feather sticks with his axe.
Wish you guys could see the bugs here.
I'd like to give a shout out to another channel that's well worth watching. That's Basha Dweller, or Sean. Sean is a medic in the British Army. He's a man who's been around the block. He's a great outdoors man, does a lot of wild camping, mountain climbing. He has a wide variety of subjects in his video and he's well worth watching. When I bought my latest tent, I took advice from Sean. I'll show you a little bit of Sean's footage now.
And this is what I call Private Miller. I'll just put a short little video in now, shows you what he does.
So some great stuff there, well worth watching, and he takes us to some lovely parts of the UK and Scotland. Some places that I'd love to get to someday. I digress. The whole purpose of this video was to test the Victorinox Farmer. So what do I think of it? I like it a lot. It is a really useful knife, and it's a knife for making things with. I think it is probably a better bushcraft knife than many being brandished on YouTube as such. To make it perfect for me, I would give it another full-size blade. More than one blade is a great advantage on a folding knife. However, if you have some way to field sharpen it, you can easily get around this. My advice, get you one. Seeing as how I use this knife to build a survival shelter, does that make this a survival knife? That could cause a good argument. What do you think? Anyway, that's my review of the Victorinox Farmer. I like it a lot. A perfect pocket knife. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and thanks very much for watching Vinnie's Day Off. Bye bye.